kids in Kentucky and all across America are struggling. As a legislator, I'm constantly given data, charts, things of that nature that shows a decline in a lot of areas in respect to our kids, whether it be education, depression, suicide rates that are going up. But I don't really have to have statistics and charts to see what is going on. I actually can just look right in our communities, right in our hometown, inside of our churches, all across our nation. There is a struggle that is going on with the family. And when I ran for office the first time, if you'll remember, I talked a lot about foundational principles. And one of the things that is foundational to our country is the family. But there is an all-out attack, it seems like, on that foundation. And people have talked about as the family goes, so the country goes, or the nation goes. We know that church and God is important inside of that structure, but there's definitely been an attack on the family unit that has actually reached the kids of this generation. I hear all types of things that's going on.
As a legislator, one of your obligations is to listen to the concerns of your constituents. And so I know a lot of those concerns have been voiced about the children in Kentucky, Kentucky's youth. So what are some concerns that you have heard in this session? Just started this in January. So I know we've talked about some of the things that have been brought in different committees, different meetings. What are some of the concerns?
Well, one of the things that has come up has been how this is affecting the young adults. And a lot of people talk about a lot of different things, but I think one of the things that has been brought up the most to me has been when it comes to employment. So they're talking about young adults just becoming adults, or in that 17, 18, 19-year-old range, how that they don't show up on time, how that they have all types of excuses as to why they miss work if they do land a job. They're coming to their interview with pajamas on, with their hair not combed. They don't know how to look somebody in the eye. They don't know how to firmly grip a hand when they shake a hand. Just basic, simple, soft skills, as some would call them, that is totally lacking in this generation. And I've sat down with business leaders. I've sat down with business organizations and economic development people, and they're saying we have a problem. And they're not just saying that it's a little bit of a problem, but it is a major problem. They cannot find and keep and retain younger people to work as a whole.
Right. So what are they proposing to do? Because that is the future of our community, of our state, of our jobs.
Well, this is the thing, and it's an interesting conversation because most of the time what you hear is they want to cater to that generation and basically just accept the fact that this is the way they are. So we have to find ways to engage and incentivize. And sometimes there's talks about training and how can we get to them younger in school. And we hear those conversations. But this is the thing. When I was growing up, which really wasn't that long ago, showing up to work on time was a condition of employment.
Right.
But there are companies, and I've talked with some just in the past couple of weeks, that they are literally giving an additional bonus at the end of each week if their employee shows up on time.
Terrible.
So they're giving them an incentive to show up. They used to be that if you couldn't pass a drug test, you couldn't get a job. And then we started having more problems with people using drugs. And then it was, well, if you can pass one after 30 days of employment. And then it was, we're not going to drug test at all. And if you have a drug problem, we will pay for you to get help so that we can retain you as an employee. And I'm all for helping people. But I think what we have done is we have catered to the deficiencies instead of really looking into why is this a problem? How did we get here? And how do we fix this problem?
So I think that my first job that I had in the state of Kentucky, I was still a teenager, but you couldn't miss work for 90 days.
Yeah.
That was a given.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
You had to go 90 days, and if you were sick or anything, and people did that and would do that to maintain their job. And now if you can get somebody to work for 90 days is a pretty big feat. And if that's a problem, because we need to build our workforce.
Right.
And so if that's what's coming up, we're gonna have a big gap. And so how, that is a problem.
I heard the other day that there's about 8 million open jobs in America. In the state of Kentucky, there is somewhere around 1.5 jobs per every person that is eligible or available to be able to work. And we here in Kentucky, we have had for a long time, our workforce participation rate has been very low comparatively to the rest of the country. So we know that we have a problem, but this specifically has really brought to light some of the issues that I think go back to the family structure. So thinking about what has created this problem and who is responsible for this problem that we are dealing with. And I read this statement the other day. I can't remember what I was looking at, but it's an old statement, old quote, but it still rings true, and I think it's very relevant for today. It said that hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And I believe that we're living in an era of time that weak men have created these hard times that we have been dealing with. I was thinking about someone that we mutually know the other day, and his upbringing really was not that good whenever you think about it as to what my upbringing was like. Having 2 parents in the home, being able to have what I needed to live, didn't worry about the next meal, was taken to church when I was young, just that type of upbringing. And this young man was not in that type of environment at all. His dad left when he was young and left him at home with his mom, and I think 2 other brothers were in the home. I think there was another brother as well, but it was the 3 of them. And he was probably about 12 years old when he started doing summer work and trying to make some extra money, not so he could have money, but he was doing that for his family. Right. And from about the time that he was probably 13 or 14 on, he paid the bills. He worked in the evenings and he worked in the summer to pay his bills in order to be able to take care of his mom and the struggles that she had and his 2 other brothers. And then he started saving money, put himself through engineering school, and got out of engineering school and landed a really good job and working 75, 80, 90 hours a week and was, began to make good money, started some other companies. And he has children now. And I'm sure as a man and as a dad, he would not want his son to go through what he has been through. But at the same turn, what he has been through has made him the man that he is. And he is very driven. He's very motivated. He understands the conditions of employment, what it means to produce, and all of those things. And I think it's easy for us, and probably was easy for a lot of people that were, the age of our parents and down into our generation. that may have had it a little bit tough and then didn't want their kids to go through what they went through. And we have created a soft generation.
There are some things that parents that they deal with today that I don't feel like we had to deal with as heavily. Social media was not a huge presence early on with our kids. So there's pressure from social media. There's the violence there. There's things with sexuality that's just bombarding them from all things. So that is something that parents are dealing with now that we didn't really have that struggle with. Another thing that parents are dealing with too is I feel like they're raising children who have a sense of entitlement.
Right.
Have you noticed that?
Absolutely.
And just like you were talking about, giving that example, that fellow that worked so hard to become what he has become, a lot of times they turn around and they don't want their kids to go through that, like you said. And that can be detrimental.
Extremely detrimental.
And it comes from a good place. It comes from a good place. Yeah. I call it misplaced compassion. I don't know another term for it, but you feel like you're doing the right thing and it comes from a good place. So you're doing it and it's actually harmful.
Right.
And so you have kids today that are entitled and they want what people have worked for their entire lives starting out. And that's not reality. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so you have kids that are 20 years old and they want a job that they're making $100,000 a year, which is so just crazy. And if they're talented and they've worked hard, and I understand that, but you're not worth $100,000 a year. That's just the truth. And we have kids that are being paid for things. And then if I said, hey, I'll give you $6 an hour when you're 15 to do something, they would laugh.
Right.
They don't want my $6 an hour because they don't need my $6 an hour.
Yes.
Because their parents think they're doing them a favor by giving them everything that they want, and not, it just produces this sense of entitlement to where they don't need to work for things. And then when they come to real life, they're crumbling.
Right.
They're falling apart.
Well, we are dealing with pressures that you just mentioned, unlike maybe any generation has ever dealt with. Every generation has had their own problems and their own societal issues to face. But this society, because of the media aspect, the electronics and all that is involved with that, young people are bombarded, I believe, with constant comparison.
Right.
So the entitlement a lot of times is driven by them comparing themselves to what they've seen or what they've been exposed to from a social media aspect. And the truth is, most of that is a facade.
Right.
It's not real life. It's not really how she looks. It's not really how good his life is, whatever the case may be.
It's only what they want you to see.
That's right. And so they're comparing to that. And parents, rightfully so, to some extent, they want their kids to be happy. They want them to enjoy life. And so these kids are comparing themselves to other kids and to other people. And then they express this dissatisfaction. And then parents don't want their kids to be dissatisfied. And they find themselves competing with people they don't even know.
Or like.
They're competing with people that are not in the same budget structure that they're in, or whatever the case may be. Instead of just living life and teaching good principles and good character, you think about what has happened just with the respect for authority with young people in this day, when we had all of the attack on law enforcement and people disrespecting the teachers at school and videoing that and putting that on social media. None of those things would have flew in my dad's house.
Or mine.
I promise you, it would not. And
if I got in trouble at school and my parents knew about it,
that's right.
I got in trouble at home.
You tried your best to make sure they didn't find out.
Now, today, if your kid gets in trouble at school, the parents go to the school to see why you're picking on their kid.
That's right.
It's changed. It's changed, and it's created a monster that we don't know what to do with.
Well, this is the thing. We've talked about the aspect of unearned praise.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's a winner.
Everybody wins. Nobody is a loser. Everybody gets a first place trophy.
They're lying to you.
That's exactly right.
Everybody is not a winner. Everybody doesn't get a sticker for effort. You have to earn those things.
Yes.
I hate participation ribbons. I don't want one. I don't want you to give my kids one. I don't want you to give my grandkids one. You don't get a prize just for showing up. That is reasonable service.
Yes.
Then when you go above and beyond and put effort, but when you put everybody together, nobody tries to do better than the other person because everybody gets the same blue ribbon.
Well, this is what I would tell the young people in our society today. If you will show up on time, you will put forth the effort and work hard on the job. If you will show up every day, and if you will comb your hair, just do those 4 things, you will stand out on the job, and there will be somebody that will invest in you if you'll just do those specific things.
And that's sad. That is sad that you have to, that's where we're at. If you will show up and you have no skills and you know, just the things before that used to be, like you said, that was just a means to be employed. But that's what we're dealing with. And then trying to work from that's how low we have come in expectation of
I'll
kids.
tell you what's more sad than that, or is the people that's going to be watching this that is going to say, I can't believe that they're taking the time to talk about things like this. That's what is sad, because we have come to the place that people have decided to move on instead of fixing the issues that are going on in our society. And this is what has happened.
But those kids are going to grow up.
That's right.
And we're going to get old. And everything still needs to function. And what if you have legislators showing up in Frankfurt in Sesame Street pajamas and they can't look people in the eye and they
John
have to...
Fetterman.
Yeah.
Showing up in his hoodie and his shorts on the House or on the Senate floor and tennis shoes.
It's just not going to work. It's not going to work.
No, we've lost respect for everything that is normal and has been normal and natural for the last 100 years. And so this is the thing that is troubling me, that's bothering me, is if by softening everything in our society,
Misplaced compassion.
the misplaced compassion, all of the things that we've done, the social emotional learning, and basically we have created divides by telling people that they deserve things that they didn't earn, and that they don't deserve things because of the color of their skin or because of the continent that they came from. All of those things have produced division. And if we have tried to soften the blow in every way for kids, we have made them soft. And instead of it making their life better, we have more kids with mental health issues than we have ever had.
Depression and anxiety and different things. And so that leads to a lot of kids becoming medicated. And that doesn't necessarily help in the long run either. Mm-hmm. I know that you have talked about, you've introduced a bill, the number of that bill.
House Bill 572.
Okay. And I think that has to do with psychotropic drugs.
Yes.
For the youth.
Yes.
And what is the gist of that bill?
It actually does a few things. One is that it requires what's called informed consent. And I've had some people, say, well, they already required to do informed consent, but what the bill is very specific. So it's informed consent, and it tells specifically what the physician has to tell the parent, what they have to inform them of, the documentation of that. So there's an actual sign off to prove that they did it. And then there's also the collection of that information as far as getting that back to the Cabinet of Health and Family Services so that they can make sure it's done. And if the physician does not do that, they're not informing the parent, then they would withhold the Medicare payments to that physician. So it puts some teeth into it. It makes it very specific what the parent has to know. And the thing about it is, in regard to these psychotropic drugs, they have what is called a black box warning on it.
Okay.
And so that is the highest level of warning that can be on a prescribed drug. So for instance, fentanyl, it has a black box warning on it. These psychotropic drugs that are being prescribed to kids, and this bill deals specifically with taxpayer-funded, Medicaid-funded, these drugs have black box warnings on them, and they are addictive in nature.
On all of them?
Yes.
Okay.
And many times they are just masking problems. They're not fixing problems. And so I just felt like it was important for our young people, with all the societal issues that we are dealing with, we have to deal with them. We have to find a way to get to the root of the problem and address those problems instead of medicating kids to deal with them.
Okay, so the psychotropic drugs, what types of issues or disorders or mental health are they used for? Like autism?
So it could be autism, it could be
ADHD,
it could be RAD, reactive attachment disorder, things like that. But a lot of times it's simply for what is diagnosed as depression.
Okay. So one thing that I noticed, there were some numbers out there, and so and I think maybe you have a bigger number. So with Kentucky youth, how many, what I guess maybe 6 to 18, something like that. How many are on psychotropic drugs in the state of Kentucky? From
age 0 to 17.
Okay.
Right now, or in 2023 is what this number comes from. This is only Medicaid or Medicaid. I said Medicare earlier, Medicaid, only Medicaid paid.
So not self-pay or private insurance?
That's correct.
Okay.
So just Medicaid only. About 89,000 kids in our state.
Wow.
So pretty much 1 out of 10 kids in the state of Kentucky
are on one of these drugs.
Are on a Medicaid paid psychotropic drug. And that does not include, again, self-pay or private pay. So we know it's more than that. I don't know what that number is. But when I started looking at it, as I was thinking about these societal issues that we're dealing with as young people come of age to get into the workforce and get into college and become parents and those types of things, we're dealing with stuff we have never seen before.
Right.
A lot of these kids have been started at a very young age on some of these drugs and have been on them basically their whole life.
Is that the intent?
This is the thing. I know there are people that I've had people email me already and say, you're not a doctor, so shut up. That's the nice way of putting how they said it. But this is what I do know. I do know that they're in the pharmaceutical industry, in big pharma, that there are people that desire for citizens of America to be lifelong users of specific drugs. They do not want you healed. They do not want you fixed because it drives up the revenue stream. And so do I think every doctor that prescribes psychotropic drugs is tied to that? No. Do I think every parent that allows that to happen to their kid? No. It's tied to that? No. But I will tell you that inside of the system, there are people that seek to have kids on these drugs their entire life.
So that could be posing a problem with some of these younger adults that we're seeing come into the workforce. Maybe they've been treated with these medicines or something like that. Maybe that's some of the reason that we're dealing with that. You mentioned 0 to 17. So 0, okay,
Yeah.
That's young. Are there kids that young on psychotropic drugs?
Yes, but under the age of 5, as far as Medicaid paid, there's over 8,300 kids in Kentucky, or was in 2023, that was on some type of psychotropic drug.
Under the age of 5?
Yes.
Okay. So what behavior disorder would, say a 2-year-old have or a 3-year-old have? What are they treating them for?
Many of them, they're treating them for depression.
How do you know if a 3-year-old is depressed? I'm not being funny, or
No,
I'm not a medical doctor or a psychiatrist.
That's the question that I'm asking.
We have 2 3-year-old grandsons, and they right now their mood swings are fluid.
Right.
Because they're 3. They can be perfectly happy, and then when you tell them it's time to go, they're gonna throw a tantrum.
Exactly.
And
right.
they're from 0.1 to 10 in just a few seconds. That doesn't mean that they need a mood stabilizer. That's
Right.
just that they're 3. So I'm saying, what do you look for in a 3-year-old who's depressed?
Well, I think many times what is going on is some of these kids are in foster care. Some of these kids, if it's Medicaid paid, then most likely a lot of times these are people that are not of means, maybe people that don't have a lot of money. And I think that sometimes parents maybe don't really understand or know what they are allowing their kids to take. They want them to get help, could be. They're dealing with struggles. Some of these kids have dealt with all types of trauma at a very young age, and maybe they're thinking that they need something to help them get through or to deal with that trauma. This is the problem, though, is that some of these drugs are only recommended to be prescribed for up to 14 days. But we have kids in Kentucky that have been on them for years.
Well, I know that medicine for ADHD and some of those different disorders, there's 100% side effects every time. That's
Right.
That's a big deal to me as a parent. And I don't have young kids at home anymore, but we do have grandkids. 100% side effects, that's, a big deal. One of the things that they talked about was it affects their appetite.
Yeah.
It affects their sleep pattern, and it maybe causes agitation. So if you give that type of medicine to a kid, that's just kind of asking for trouble. They're not eating the way they need to, if they're not sleeping the way that they need to, if they're agitated, I would think that would compound the problem.
Well, there are other things. There are physical aspects and there's emotional, mental aspects to these types of drugs. This is something that has been called for, and we never see it. We never find out exactly what is going on in these situations. But when we have had like real severe events, such as school shootings by minors that has taken place, people have called for transparency to find out what type of drugs they were being prescribed, if any. And a lot of times what we have found out is that many of these people that have committed these unthinkable crimes have been on psychotropic drugs, and some of them have been for years. And so, again, I'm not a physician, and I readily admit that, but I also understand when you start a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old on something that is addictive in nature and you keep them on that, it is going to affect them
for the rest of their life. It will.
Yeah.
So I think that medication, and there's need for it, but it should be a last resort.
Yeah.
It should be, we have tried all the things. And maybe that's where parents need some guidance, maybe some knowing there's therapies out there. There's behavior therapies. We know people that have their kids involved in some of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things in our community that will help young parents, that will help parents that have kids with different disabilities and disorders. And so maybe letting parents know to try certain things before they do a medication, because the medication is going to have a side effect no matter what.
Well, I think a lot of what we're dealing with in our society is parents that are not parenting. And I'm not trying to be critical of anyone, nor would I try to set myself up as an example. But parenting is not easy.
It's work.
It's work. And we know what is best. It's best to have a mom and a dad in the home. I was looking at some statistics about that today, about young people that grow up without a biological father in the home. And the statistics are unbelievable as to what is happening with young people, and specifically young men in our society. And so when it comes to parenting being work, and when you have both parents that are working, or you have a single mom or a single dad, and they're dealing with a rambunctious child who's getting in trouble at school, and they're getting called on the job to come to school because they got to meet with the principal because their kid acted out in class, or they won't be still, or they are picking on another kid. And before you know it, they're roped into this idea that, well, if you give them this medication, they'll be better. And we've talked with some counselors and people just about this specific subject, and they even made the statement that there are counselors and teachers that are making these recommendations to the parent.
And I could see a teacher making that recommendation because teachers have more students than they can handle.
Mm-hmm.
They have all different levels. They don't have the ideal classroom setting. They have different kids on, different behavior levels and the different needs. And so if somebody is constantly disrupting or doing different things, they may say, hey, they probably need something to calm them down.
Yeah.
And, and it's nice for that to happen. But medication, like I said, should be a last resort. Parents really have to step in. And that is something that we see a struggle in across the board, is parental involvement in education anyway.
Right.
Knowing where your kids are at, asking them the questions, working with them, helping them, assessing them. And that's just where a parent is going to have to take that extra time and do those things. It's so beneficial. And if you lose that in those early years and you let some medication in, that maybe there are times when it's needed. There's documented cases where kids are overprescribed, and
right.
They find that out way. And you mentioned about kids in the foster care.
Mm-hmm.
All of those people that are on those different types of drugs, they're supposed to have check it a week, 2 weeks, different things, all of these different types of tests. And the kids in the foster care system, they have the least oversight with all that because they're here, there, and everywhere, and they're
right.
overworked. And so they're overprescribed, or sometimes, they're having these different side effects, and they're not catching that.
They're falling through the cracks.
Yes.
This is the thing. Over 2,100 0 to 5 year olds were prescribed or on antidepressants. 2,700 were on antipsychotics, and over 2,900 were on mood stabilizers. 0 to 5 year olds
In Kentucky. What does a mood stabilizer do?
So
I know what it does. I'm just saying, think about that. A mood stabilizer for someone under 5.
yeah, so mood stabilizers would include drugs such as lithium. There's a lot of side effects to this: coma, seizures, cardiac arrest, diabetes, hallucinations, confusion. And it does have a black box warning as well because of some of the serious physical things that it can do. But a lot of times what it does is it literally takes the spirit out of the child. And I think that's some of what I have seen by experience is with some of these kids that are placed on these types of drugs, they end up becoming a shell. They don't have emotion.
They don't have a personality.
They don't have a personality. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not claiming to be. I'm just trying to raise awareness for a lot of reasons. And I'm going back to the foundational principle that the home is part of the foundational structure of this nation. And if the country, as the home goes, so the country goes, when over 50% of marriages end up in divorce, when suicide is the third leading cause of death for young people, when illicit drugs are rampant in our society, and then we are medicating our kids at the youngest, earliest ages on drugs that have the ability to be addictive in nature, we are headed for a collision.
Well, 0 to 5 years old, you think of all the changes that take place during that time in a young person and their personality and their development and their, you could very quickly, within a year, if they have a temper, if they get mad quick, you can tell if they're easygoing, all these things. And then you can work with them with their personalities that they're exhibiting. And if they're getting mad or angry at certain things, you can kind of help them through, like this is something that we don't get angry about and teach them to deal with those outbursts. If you are medicating during that time when all that is transpiring, I can't help but think that you're messing up their development somehow, or at least dampening it.
We were in committee meeting last week, and there was a bill that was brought forward to require some type of assessment at the end of kindergarten for kids to make sure that they can read before they go on to first grade. And it's a known fact that if they get past third grade and they can't read, statistically, they're never going to be able to proficiently at all. They're going to struggle, and, statistically, they're not going to finish. There's a lot that goes with making sure they can read before the third grade. And in the public school system, they don't begin pass or fail assessments until the fourth grade. And so up through the third grade, there were some individual school districts that did their own thing, but we were looking at it, and we were talking about the difference as well when it comes to immaturity between boys and girls at that age. And what I'm being told by principals of elementary schools is that girls many times are far ahead of young boys at age 5 and age 6 in maturity. And this is the way that he put it in committee the other day. He said, little girls come in, they got their backpack, they got their pencil, they got their notepad, they're ready to take notes and do what the teacher says. And all the boys care about is the little dinosaur that they brought, the Tonka truck that they got, and what kind of food they got in that backpack, to eat at lunch. And
that doesn't make them immature.
In the school that our kids went to, there's a teacher that we've talked to several times, and she's made the statement, boys aren't broken.
Right. Yeah.
They learn different. They have to be engaged and be taught in a different way, but there's nothing wrong with them.
No.
But, we have grandkids. One of our grandkids, of the two older ones, is more laid back. He's, his mood is kind of up and down based on how much he's liking what's going on around him. And if his sugar drops and he gets a piece of candy, he's happy. And if it's high and he can't have a piece of candy, he's not happy. And then we have one that's wide open.
All the time.
moving constantly. He can't be still. He's playing a dinosaur all the time. He can name every dinosaur that, there ever was. And that's his personality. That's who and what he is.
And he's smart.
He's very smart. But it would be easy as a parent to be in that situation, to be overwhelmed, and to say, hey, we can slow him down a little bit. We could, I don't know. It scares me to death to think that so many kids are being placed in this position, and parents maybe a lot of times don't understand the harm that is being done. I'm not saying people are bad parents. There are bad parents.
Yes, there are.
But I'm just saying we've got to look at this, and we have to make sure that we are building strong homes and we are instilling character and respect and work ethic and reward for effort.
Right.
And those types of things in young people.
And, speaking about young men, I know that the psychotropic drugs have detrimental effects, especially for males. We have 3 sons, and when they were young, every one of them would have probably, if I would have went to the doctor and said some of the things, and they probably would have said,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're ADHD or whatever, and put them on medication because they had, they were boys.
Right.
And boys are different. I had a student the other day that I knew we were going to test, and I just thought they didn't listen. They were sharpening their pencil. They were taking and drumming. They had a little ball that they were doing just all over the place. I called several times. Would you, trying to get their attention. Time for test. And I already was in my mind trying to plan how I was going to explain to the parent their low test grade.
Yeah.
Got the highest grade in the class. So it just because they're not sitting still doesn't mean that they're not able to learn, or you know what I'm saying?
Right. But there were times. So I have 4 brothers, and they're 6 years from the oldest to the youngest, similar to our kids, you know. And I remember going out to places, going out to eat, going to other churches and those types of things, and people coming up to my parents and saying, I can't believe how well behaved your kids are. Now, we were getting away with things that they didn't see, right? But we knew in public when we went out that what the expectation was, what was going to happen if we didn't meet the expectation. And it wasn't about some kind of reward just for actually being good and being respectful. That was the minimal expectation. Right. And so, and there's some things that are going to come out. So there's been some discussion with RFK Jr. has talked about that he believes that there's some things in our foods that have increased some of these problems, potentially some things in vaccines that maybe have caused some of these problems to get greater. I don't know the answer to all of that, but I do know this. I do know that if parents will parent, they will engage, that the outcome is statistically and subject to be much better than if they let a screen raise their kid.
Yes,
or they try to medicate them so they do not have to deal with them.
So what are some things that we can encourage?
Let me say this real quick before we talk about that. I went through a period of time that I was dealing with some major physical issues. I hurt my back, and I couldn't sleep for a long time. I mean, I was literally trying to live on 2.5 hours of sleep a night.
I remember.
And I was going to the doctor. I'm trying to find out what's going on. I had some major deficiencies with some of my vitamin levels, and I was having tons of blood work done. I was having x-rays and tests. I was going through all of that, and I went to a specific doctor one time, and we were working on a game plan, and they said, here, I've got some things that will help you just so that you can feel better, and maybe these will give you a little bit of relief. And that was the general conversation. So I left there, went and did some things, came back by the pharmacy, picked up my prescriptions, and I get home, and I have 2 psychotropic drugs that have been prescribed to me for physical health issues.
That were never discussed.
Never. And they were addictive in nature. If I would have just started taking them, not paid attention to what it was, and done my research, I very easily could have become addicted to them. There's all types of problems. And I don't know the answer. I don't know exactly what it was all behind that. But I'm just saying that is exactly what happened.
I remember when you called about it, you called the doctor's office and said, why did you send this? This has nothing to do with my back pain. This has nothing to do with the test that they're running. And he just said, if you feel like it will help. Do you remember? He said, take it if you need it.
Yes.
It's there if you need it. You said, I don't need it. Thank you very much.
No, that's right. It scared me to some degree
that it was that easy to get to somebody.
Easy. And that's what's troubling me about what's going on with this. When we know that a lot of these kids are in foster care, $65 million was spent through Medicaid for psychotropic drugs for minors in the state of Kentucky in 2023. I would hope that this is not a revenue stream for somebody, or this is not somebody's philosophical belief that this is the answer to all the world's problems. And we got to look at it. We have to find out what is going on.
Absolutely.
We have to.
So parents, what can they do to try to help their children? How can they help them get ready for the workforce? What are some of the suggestions maybe to help with our Kentucky youth?
Part of it is I think about instilling values in them.
Okay.
My dad, I remember growing up, and he would use this statement: I didn't have to chase you down to let you borrow it, so I shouldn't have to chase you down to get it back. Right. Whatever it was, I remember one of my brothers getting something from him and him driving to their house to pick it up, because he needed it and it had never been brought back to him. But it's those simple things, those values: yes, sir; no, sir; yes, ma'am; no, ma'am; respect authority. Standing there are there bad people in every sector of society, but like you were talking about, if you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home.
Right.
Mom and dad was always going to err on the side of the teacher.
Right.
And if they found out different, it wasn't that they weren't going to stand up for me, but they wanted me to understand that authority was a part of life. And I better learn to deal with it. And not just learn to deal with it, but learn to respect it. And so I think instilling those specific values, one thing that I tried to instill in our kids, and we're still working on it, is be on time.
Yes.
Show up on time. If you are on time, you're pretty much late. I would get to church an hour early. You don't have to get to church an hour early. When I worked in the public sector, I would go into work usually an hour early. I would get there an hour, 45 minutes to an hour before work started. I got things together. But my dad taught me that. I remember what time my dad would get up. I knew what time he left, and I knew what time his shift started. And if I got up at 6:30 and he was still at home, he was either deathly sick or something bad had happened, because he was going to be at work.
Right.
And because of that, when I went to work, I
modeled that.
Oh, yeah. I got a perfect attendance award for 14 years in a row. But I was very interested in making sure that I was there, that I was on time, and that I did my job while I was there. And because of that, I was able to be promoted. They invested in me. It allowed me to go to Eastern Kentucky University and get my certification in safety and health management, which grew my career to a level that I would have never been able to grow it to.
Right.
And so, but all of that was instilled in me when I was growing up. And so between my dad and my pastor that I spent a lot of time with, always pushing, you can be better, you can do better. If you got rewarded, it was because of effort.
So you just said, always pushing, you can do better and you can be better.
Mm-hmm.
And think about that with the message from society today. You are the best.
Yeah.
You are amazing. You are enough. You be you. And it gives no room for be better.
Yeah.
And it almost seems mean. And that's where I say that misguided compassion.
Right.
Because you don't want them to feel bad.
Yeah.
They need to feel bad.
Right.
How can you grow? Okay. How can you grow and become? So one thing too, you're talking about modeling behavior in front of your kids that they will in turn do with punctuality and with work ethic. Adversity with your kids, letting them work some things out.
Right.
We are very quick to the rescue.
Yes.
Right?
I remember a friend of mine talking about a chain that was in the bed of his truck that he needed, and his son was really small at the time, and he needed that chain out of there, and he helped his son get up into the bed, and there was all kind of stuff in there, and the chain was wrapped around everything that was there. And he said, I could have easily pulled the chain right out of there. But he said, I let him work through it, figure out what to unravel, what to work through. And it was a struggle. But when he got it out, he had a smile on his face. He came to him and he brought it, and he had taught him a lesson. And again, there are people that are going to be listening to this, and they're going to say, oh, here they're talking about silly stuff. You are the problem. It is that mindset that has brought us to the place that we are at, because those little things are important. You instill values, and then you have to set boundaries. There has to be things that are not acceptable, and parents have to stand their ground.
And there has to be consequences when they cross the boundaries.
Yeah, I thought about, and my mom and dad never used this, I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 2.5, 2.75, 2.9, all of those things.
Don't make me say 3.
Yeah, don't make me say it. Don't make me. But the thing is that there has to be boundaries set, things that are unacceptable, and parents have to stand their ground. There were things that I did that I should not have done. And when I did them, there was fear inside of me, because I knew that there was going to be repercussions for doing things I was not supposed to do. How many young people in homes today do you think have that fear that they're going to get in trouble for doing something they shouldn't do? Whatever that trouble may be, whatever the punishment may be, and that's left up to the parent, and the parent decides that. But at the end of the day, it seems like that a lot of times kids are just able to get away with whatever. I remember as a kid seeing kids in Walmart laying on the floor kicking and screaming, and I'm thinking, how in the world do they get away with that? There's no way that would even go through my mind that I could do that.
Kids do well, though, and with boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Parents think a lot of times kids are going to, fuss or push back against it, but kids do well.
Right.
And if they know boundaries, they get used to it and they're fine.
Yes.
And they're nothing bad is going to happen. They'll do fine. You need to let them struggle through their own problems, adversities, fix some things, and then you need to set boundaries for them. You also need to reality.
Yeah.
Give them reality.
Yes.
And this you can be anything you want to be. That's a lie. That's a lie. That whether that's
I'm not going to make it to the NBA.
No. And you have to, they tell kids that.
I don't know how I'm going to deal with this.
How
am I going to work through this, Kyle? Kyle does our recording here. I'm struggling. She says I'm not going to make it in the NBA.
Be truthful to your kids and let them know that. And they pump them up full of praise and give them this notion that I can do anything and be anything. And they get out in the real world and they get smacked down really quick. And then they're depressed.
Yes.
So it creates havoc. So let your kids know, as a parent, find their talents.
Yeah.
And push them in that direction. And, find their gifts and and that's you as a parent. That's your job. Figure out what they're good at and their skills. And so when your son comes to you and says, my dream is to be a race car driver, and they're a horrible driver, or they don't know how to do anything about a car, you can gently steer them in a different direction.
Right.
But be realistic. Don't lie to your kids. Don't promote all of this that they're the greatest kid in the world. Mm-hmm. They're not.
I remember our niece who plays the violin, and she plays really well, but she was pushed when she was young. She started, 3 years old when she started playing, and she was made to practice. And I remember when it went and switched over from being pushed to becoming competitive, to where she would cry when she would mess up at a competition, not because of any reason other than that she wanted to do well.
Right.
That she had practiced, she had pushed herself and has excelled through that. But that began when she was a little girl, and she cried when she had to practice, and she cried when she had to go to lessons, and she missed out on some things. But now that she's teaching and making good money at a young age and has a great future in front of her with music,
it's worth it.
It's worth it. Yeah. And so be real with them. And then I think also just teach responsibility. Teach responsibility. And that can go all the way from putting something back when you get it out, to keeping your room clean, to studying for tests, to when they get that first job, to make sure they're there on time, whatever the case may be. But let kids be responsible and hold them accountable to that.
And teach them through all of those steps and those processes. Give them things to do. Mm-hmm. And if you will keep a kid occupied, not that you have to entertain them, but they need to be a part of your daily life at home. Right. And they're not just there and, I have to get them out of the way for a little bit while I get stuff done. Make them help you get stuff done.
Right.
And they will become productive.
Yes.
They will become an asset to have around. I joked because our 3 kids got married kind of early, and I said, just when you're beneficial, you leave. But you can teach them, and then that gives them purpose. That also wears their mind out a little bit to where they're not restless, or they're not depressed, or they're not seeking other things. They have purpose, and they have, they have focus, and they have things to do, and they're a part of the family unit. I just think that parents, and there are good parents out there, tons. I'm not saying that. And we are not the perfect parents at all. There's so many things that you go back and you think, if I could do that over again. But just knowing your kids, getting to know your kids, giving them something to work with and learn and do, all of those things create such a better environment for them.
Well, I believe that our country is at a crossroads. And what we are going to desperately need in this country going forward are leaders. We need young people coming up that can grab a hold of something and see it through. And we need strong leadership more now than ever. And we have created this soft generation, these hard times and then the good times, and have created soft men. And we need leaders, men and women, that are willing to hold themselves accountable and hold the people around them accountable. And what training them up has done has made them ready to train the next generation. Right. Because that's what this is about. This is not just about me. It's not just about what is going on right now today. It is about the future for my grandkids, for my great-grandkids,
Right.
to have freedom, to have a future, and to have those things. We have got to do some work with the generation that is coming up. And I believe in the midst of all of that, the key ingredient is to not leave God out of it, but to put God in the very center of everything that you do with your family. And if you will do that, I believe that there's hope for this nation. And if we don't do it, we're in trouble. So thank you for listening. And we talked about a lot of things tonight, and we talked about things that are, I'm sure they're controversial. And if you have experiences with the psychotropic drugs and with young people or with foster care or with any of those things, we would love to hear from you about it. So comment in this video. Go ahead and share this video, like and subscribe to our channel. Reach out to us. We want to hear from you, and we want to know what your experiences are. And I'm not talking from a physician standpoint. I'm just talking about what we see in our society, in the community that I serve in. And so we want to hear from you. We want to be a help any way that we can. House Bill 572 is the bill that I filed for that informed consent and to allow us to get more information from Medicare and Medicaid about what is going on in our state and how we can help our young people. So we would appreciate it if you would advocate for that bill. You can call the LRC, Kentucky LRC, and you can ask to have that bill heard and to see it move forward. We would appreciate that. Stay engaged, stay informed, and we appreciate all of you listening and watching our podcast. God bless.